Today on the Backup Wrap-Up, we're starting a new series on ransomware. Today's episode starts at the beginning by defining this scourge. What is it? What isn't it? And why it's become such a massive threat to businesses and individuals. We'll talk about the evolution of ransomware attacks from simple data encryption to sophisticated extortion schemes, and discuss the critical importance of prevention and recovery strategies. In the coming weeks, you'll see many more episodes on this topic as we focus especially on how to prepare yourself to be able to respond and recover from a ransomware attack. By the way, if you have no idea who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. And I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of Paris. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me the person who's helping me to celebrate my financial freedom from the IRS. How's it going, Persona?
I'm doing well, Curtis. Yeah, congratulations. How does it feel to get, what would you call it? The 10-ton elephant off your back? Is that the appropriate phrase?
So for those that don't know, like through various things that weren't malfeasance on my part, I have owed the IRS money for the better part of 10 years. Two different totally unrelated events. I ended up owing them money, and I've been paying them slowly and surely for somewhere in the neighborhood of the last 10 years. And literally May 1st, I made the last payment. And so for the first time in my 50s, I don't owe the IRS any money.
Well, it's better to be in your 50s than your 80s.
Yeah, that is true. I don't recommend owing the IRS money. They get theirs for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted we've finished our series on cloud disasters, and we had the one episode on a cloud non-disaster. It's a cloud disaster that had a good happy ending. And I wanted us to get back to something else that has been very popular with our listeners, which is the concept of ransomware. If you are, a new listener to the podcast, we have covered ransomware in various ways over the years, and you're going to, this episode will actually follow up. I'm going to be, if you're listening to this now, the previous few episodes will actually be reruns, if you want to call them, of really good episodes where we had guests on that really know this issue of ransomware and recovering from ransomware. And so I wanted to...
do you have Tony's episode on there?
What's that?
Are you going to put Tony's episode out?
You know what? Yeah. Now that I realize who you're talking about, yes, I will definitely put Tony. So, that's probably was the most popular episode that we had of that time frame, which was our friend Tony over at SpectraLogic, and them talking about how they actually recovered from a ransomware attack. And we'll have some stuff coming up where we're going to be talking about ransomware and different things about how to protect from it, and how to, more importantly, it's just so many people talk about how to protect from it. They don't talk enough about how to respond to it and how to recover from it. And that's where, our specialty lies. But go ahead.
Do you know what I just read in the paper, or not the paper, what I read online today?
What's that?
So insurance companies are now trying to not have companies pay the ransomware and just sort of keep this self-propagating issue keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're actually working to or to tell their clients, don't pay the ransom.
Yeah, which is something we've always advised, right? We can't make that decision on behalf of those people, but obviously it's not a good thing to pay the ransom, right?
Yep.
In some places, it may be illegal to pay the ransom. In other places, and in all places, I think it emboldens the behavior, right?
Yep.
And you're just
I
making
liken it to my dog, where it's like if you want him to do something, you give him a treat, and then he keeps doing it because he keeps expecting the treat, and he knows he'll get a treat.
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons not to pay the ransom. So let's just start with just talking about what ransomware is, and just as importantly, what ransomware isn't. So ransomware, and I'm going to start with saying that it's a bad term, right? The term ransomware suggests that it's software. It suggests that it is a piece of software that you accidentally get, and boom, you have ransomware. And that's actually what I thought in my early days of working with ransomware.
You click
So
the wrong link, and then all of a sudden it encrypts everything. Yeah.
and that isn't really what it is, or at least not from what I can tell most of the time. But let's just define this concept of ransomware, and it comes from the term ransom, which outside of the world of IT, where would we see the word ransom used?
Hostage negotiations.
Exactly. Right. I've taken your
Kidnapping.
kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've taken your kid and you can have them back for $1 billion. The most famous kidnapping of all time that I know of was the Getty kidnapping, right? So I believe it was John Paul Getty at the time that he was the richest man in the world. They kidnapped his like grandson, and they demanded probably $1 million or something like that. And he told him to go pound sand, and then they sent him his grandchild's ear, and he said, "Fine, I'll pay the ransom." He got and he got his grandchild back. Interestingly enough, I sat next to
I was going to say.
I sat next to the grandson of that grandson on a plane once. His name's Balthazar Getty, also an actor. And I just randomly asked him if he was related to the Getty family, and he's like, "Well, the guy with the ear, that's my grandfather." It's like, wow, that is definitely a connection. So that's what a ransom is, right? Is give me, I've got something of yours, and you can have it back if you give me the ransom.
Yeah.
And you've watched TV, you've watched movies.
Do I watch TV?
Well, you have watched
yes,
movies.
yes.
You definitely watch YouTube more. What is the general thinking regarding paying the ransom in such movies?
The SBI comes in and everyone else, and they're like, "Don't pay the ransom because you're not going to see it, and they're just going to go and do something else again."
Exactly. And they often do things like demand proof of life, right?
Yep.
Just
Hold up the newspaper with today's date.
exactly, right? I want to talk to my kid, right? I want to verify, right? And all of this has they have parallels in the world of the
Digital
ransomware,
world.
right?
Yeah.
So really, this is where the term comes from: is that we're holding your data for ransom. And the classic way that manifested itself was what?
They basically would encrypt your data and say, "Hey, if you want your data back, then pay us the money and we will give you the encryption key, so then you can go unencrypt your data and everything will be back to normal."
Yeah, it's interesting. They don't steal it like in the old in the way of the the of stealing your child
Yeah.
to demand a ransom. They steal it right away from you, like right in front of you. It's like,
Well,
here's your data, but you can't use it. You can't have it.
but I think it's also one of those things where it's probably faster and easier for them,
Yeah,
right? And maybe it's also less detectable, right? Because all of a sudden, if you're like, "Hey, why am I uploading like 10 terabytes today?"
exactly. Yeah. It's super easy and super fast to encrypt the data just enough that it's not useful to you.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, we'll give you the keys, and you can have your data back. That is a
Hopefully,
traditional ransomware attack. What was that?
hopefully we will give you the
Hopefully.
keys and you can recover your data.
Right, right. And the idea was that paying the ransom, historically, paying the ransom was only a good idea if you had no backup of your data, or if your backup was such that it was going to take you so long in order to restore. When I think back to one of the most famous ransomware attacks in the last few years was the Colonial Pipeline attack.
Yep.
And that one, as I understand it, was that they had a backup, right? But they didn't think they could get the backup recovered fast enough, and so they decided to pay the ransom.
Yep.
And so they did both. They did recovery and they paid the ransom, and which just seems fundamentally wrong. But historically, that was the only reason that you would pay the ransom, is if you had no backup or a backup that was not good enough,
Yep.
because unencrypting the data or de-encrypting the data was the idea was that de-encrypting the data was faster than restoring it, right?
Yep. And that was worthwhile until sort of the ransomware actors, they had poor code quality. Right. And so you're putting faith that you are going to pay the ransom and you're going back to our classic example, right? You're going to get back your kid.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Except sometimes these ransomware actors, they would write sort of bad code. And when they gave you back the key, like how they actually did the encryption
Right.
wasn't very sound. And so, yeah, it would decrypt maybe some of the data, but it wasn't still usable. So that's like paying the ransom and they give back your kid's finger, right? Or
Yeah,
right? Or right?
exactly.
Or they give like a doll of your kid back, right? Or whatever it is, right? But it's not what you originally had transacted for,
Here's
right?
some
Agreed
videos
upon.
of your kid while we had them kidnapped. You have to think about these organizations as very sophisticated businesses. This is not a script kiddie. This is not a random piece of software that you download off the internet. This is an organization that is trying to make money for other reasons, right? They want to do things. Sometimes they're state actors. Sometimes they're just criminals that are just trying to make a lot of money. And you need to think about what are they going to focus on in terms of software quality. The thing they're going to focus on is making sure that the data gets encrypted and making sure that you can't decrypt it without their help. They're
Yep.
not necessarily that focused on that second half, which is the decryption part.
Yeah.
You could make some argument that maybe they want it to work because they want to have a reputation as an organization that does get their data back if you actually pay the ransom. But
Yeah. Or the other thing is it may not be very fast, right? So you
right,
might get all your data back, but it might take you a month.
exactly. So
One,
go ahead.
I know you talked about these organizations, right? By which you mean the ransomware actors,
Right.
right? Who are kind of well organized. I think the other thing to also mention is it's no longer just a single organization necessarily, right? You have ransomware as a service where you have these people who have all these tools and capabilities and they provide it as a service, just like you might use AWS as a service to host your application. They provide all the infrastructure tooling for all these other organizations to now start um, attacking other companies and also encrypting their data.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I want to get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
What I want to, and that everything you said is correct. Let's talk a little bit about what ransomware is not.
What is ransomware not, Curtis?
Yeah. So, it's not just a piece of software that downloads and magic happens, right? The process of getting infected with ransomware is actually a very manual process with many steps, and they are steps that are being manually driven by a human being somewhere else in the world. And The idea is that there is that initial access. There is that that basically the initial breach, which could be via a number of mechanisms. It could be old school phishing. It could be something that you download. It quite
Zero
possibly would
day.
be something that you download that you get via email, an attachment that you open that you shouldn't have. What was it? What was the thing you said?
0 day.
Yeah, it could be a 0 day exploit, right? There are myriad ways that you can basically find yourself with a portal to to the bad guys, right? So that's the first thing that has to happen is someone has to gain remote access, usually with escalated privileges, but not necessarily so, right? They
Yeah.
might just have they might have simply leveraged stolen credentials. That's another thing. They
Yep.
leveraged stolen credentials, and then you didn't have MFA on. You might have had a server that's got RDP enabled and it's open to
Mhm.
the internet. Oh my lord, RDP, the ransomware deployment
Or
protocol, right?
or you just have insecure systems that are internet facing,
Yeah,
right? How many
exactly,
people have like VMware ESXi and then they automatically have it available on the internet and boom.
exactly. Yeah, so there, like I said, there are myriad ways that a bad actor can be given initial access to one or more systems, right? And there are, and this was basically you referenced this earlier, is that there are companies, and again, it's the
Mm.
correct thing is to call them companies, right? There
Yeah.
are companies who this is what they do. They call them initial access brokers. This is all they do. They just get a foothold into an organization and then they say, hey, I've got a foothold into ABC company. Who wants that? And then they bid that on on the dark web.
Yeah, that just kind of scary when you think about it, right? Because it is a specialized role, right? That is all they do day in and day out is they try to figure out how do I gain that initial foothold with all these various mechanisms that you talked about, Curtis, and then take that and now pass it on to the next person, right? And it's their job to now figure out, okay, now what can I do next?
Yeah, it's a very specialized world, right? Because there's sort of three phases. There's that initial access. There's a second phase, which is discovery and crawling around, trying to do lateral movement, trying to expand the footprint, and then that third phase, which is the actual we're going to go and encrypt everything,
Yeah.
right?
And
The, Go ahead.
And that second phase, right? Just to touch on it, right? Moving laterally and trying to figure out other things, right? They're trying to do all of this while staying undetected, right?
Right,
Because the last thing you want to do is give up that access that you paid for from
right,
the
right.
initial access broker, right? And so you want to make sure you stay under the radar of the security team or whoever else is out there trying to prevent what you're trying to do.
Which is why one of the ways they do, well, I would say the way that they do that next phase is they use the same tools that you use, right?
Yep.
They're downloading cybersecurity tools that are designed to defend, but they use them to attack. Of
Cobalt
these,
Strike is a common one.
yeah, Cobalt Strike is definitely one of the most common ones, and there are a number of other tools that they download that don't initially set off alarms because they're not. It's not like, hey, hackertool.exe. It's a tool that you would install, and so they install these tools and then they go and they crawl around your organization, and it can be very difficult to detect that once they have gained that foothold and once they're using the same tools that you might be using to poke around. And again, I'll go back to that initial access. This is why MFA is so important, right?
Yeah.
There are a number of ways that they could get in, but MFA would be one of the ways that you would them stop. By the way, it does appear that the most common way that they get in is actually stolen credentials,
Yeah.
right? And which is just really sad.
Mhm.
Um, but it
It
is what it
happens.
is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I just this is the thing. This is where what ransomware is not. I just want people to understand that ransomware is not just one piece of software that you happen to accidentally download and then it affects your entire data center. that is absolutely what I used to think it was. It is a very sophisticated series of actions that are taken in different. There may be as many as a dozen pieces of software that are installed to affect the ultimate goal
Now,
that the bad actor wants, which of course is demanding the ransom.
I
Any
do
thoughts on that?
wonder though. Yeah, I do. I agree with that, Curtis. I also wonder though if we should really think about sort of two segments, two victim segments, if you will. One is the enterprise, which I think 100% everything you said makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think though, when you think about sort of consumer side,
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be slightly different in term because you aren't going to have all of this individual access, right? People spending time on grandma trying to gain access to her laptop, right? I think in those cases it's probably more find common vulnerabilities and whatever is the quickest and easiest way, and you just go as broad as you can because their data may not be as sensitive and as valuable necessarily,
Yeah,
or the willingness to pay or the ability to pay.
yeah, I do think that consumer-based attacks probably are much closer to that initial I download one piece of
Yeah.
software and it grabs all my data and boom, right? And then tries to reach out to a command and control server. And then it's probably closer to that initial definition that we talked about, where it's just one single piece of software, because there really isn't anything else to get out there. But that's not necessarily our target market, so I wasn't really
Yeah.
focusing on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But from a company perspective, or any organization perspective, it's going to be a very complicated process,
Yeah.
and that could go on for months
I was actually
undetected
going to say
before you
that.
actually
Yep.
get a big payload.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, I think if I go back and think about, and it's not ransomware, but just talking about this attack vector because it is common in other places as well. If I think about like the SolarWinds attack, right? They were in their systems for months,
Yeah,
right?
they were
Before they
they were
detected.
actually part of the supply chain, as I recall.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. They're depending on the size of the fish, right? They're very there is a risk reward trade off, right? The longer they can stay in undetected, the more exploration that they can do, the bigger the payoff. But
Yeah.
the longer they stay in undetected, the greater the risk that they will eventually be detected before they can
Yep.
do the payoff. So there's a big risk reward there.
Yep.
Um, so the other and really important thing, and this is why some have started changing the name of ransomware, and that is that no longer is simply encrypting the data and then saying you can have it back if you give us a ransomware. No longer is that the normal MO of the ransomware attackers. What
They've
is the
evolved.
normal MO? Yes, they have evolved, or I would
Yeah.
say devolved, but yeah,
Yeah.
they have evolved.
Right. Yeah. So now they realize, okay, people have backups, they have other systems, right? And so I would say before we get to sort of, okay, what is it really now,
Hmm.
right? I think in between, what they had started to do was really attack those systems, right? So it wasn't just encrypt your data,
Right.
right? But even locally, it was like, hey, now let's start going after the backup systems, right?
Exactly.
Because if you can restore your data, then you don't need us, right? You don't need the key,
Yeah,
right? You can handle it.
that is a really good point. That basically part of that sophisticated, large attack, they are definitely going to go after the backup system. They're trying to identify what your backup system. They know the vulnerabilities of the different backup systems, and they then go after those vulnerabilities. And this is why I talk about, and we'll talk later about changes that you should be making to your backup system in order to protect from this,
Yeah.
right? This is part of the evolution of these ransomware attackers. Is first all they had to do was encrypt, and then they found out, and people would pay the ransom, and then they found that some people had backup and recovery
Yep.
systems, and disaster recovery systems, and they were stopped paying the ransom. Well, they want people to pay the ransom, and so they're like, well, what can we do next? And so the next thing they decided to do was attack the backup systems.
Yeah. I don't think that they listen to this podcast or have read your books, Curtis. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't think so. They went after specific backup products that had specific vulnerabilities, especially Windows-based backup products, because Windows was or it continues to be the predominant OS that they're attacking in a ransomware attack. It's not the only one, but it is a predominant one. So they went after backup systems that were based on Windows. Also, backup systems whose backups were all stored on disk, because those backups are easy to delete and or encrypt, right? And we'll talk more about things, but the idea is with the backup system, the quick answer is to make sure that your backup system isn't susceptible to those types of attacks. We'll talk about that in another episode.
That could be an entire episode in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened next?
Yeah. So then, okay, they went after a backup system. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they weren't. But then they realized, just like classic ransomware or classic kidnapping and people paying ransom, they're like, hey, if we actually take your data, right, then now you don't have that option to be like, hey, just give me the encryption key. You can actually blackmail people and say, by the way, if you don't want me to release this information, pay up. And it might be sensitive information, like the Sony hack where they exfiltrated a bunch of data, and it was emails about studio, like what studio executives were saying and all the rest. Things you don't want out in public.
Right. Yeah. And it could be anything. I think the Sony attack was the first one that I really remember, because it was basically it was embarrassing data. Yeah. There are others where it's like, listen, we have your 11 herbs and spices and we're going to release them to the public. By the way, the 11 herbs and spices, I'm pretty sure have been released, but not by KFC, but by other or other entities. But, we have your company's trade secrets. We may have proof of you doing things that are actually crimes, right? Yep. There are basically, we might have competitive information that you don't want given to your closest competitor. There are a number of things. And also, I'd say the one category of data that we haven't discussed is we have PII, right? We have a whole bunch of names and credit card data that we're going to release if you don't pay the ransom. I'd say the best example of that would be the Ashley Madison attack. I don't remember if that was actually a ransomware attack, but that is an example of the kind of thing. So for those that don't remember, and it's still around, amazingly enough, Ashley Madison is a website and an organization designed to help people cheat on their spouses. And they released a bunch of identities of people that were there. There were a number of suicides that followed that particular incident. So it could be personal information, could be medical information.
Yeah. Healthcare records of celebrities or even other folks that could be detrimental if released publicly.
Right. And put it into your company. Amazingly, Ashley Madison, they released all that stuff. And one of the things that came out was that it turns out that all of the female subscribers were all fake. And yet the company still runs. Yeah. The company is still out there and people are still paying memberships. But so that is an important change in how the ransomware folks are operating. Basically, this is why many people are now starting to call it extortionware rather than just ransomware, because they're saying that we literally have stolen your data and we are going to release it to the public if you don't give us the ransom. And here's my question. Let's just say I've got the absolute best backup and disaster recovery system in the world. I've got a button that I can press, and 5 seconds later, my entire environment is recovered without incident. How well will that help me with an extortion attack?
It wouldn't at all.
Not at all. That's the worst. That's the worst part about this whole thing.
Well, and this is my problem. I know we had talked about comparing classic ransomware to digital ransomware, right? In classic ransomware, you pay the ransom. They may or may not return the person, but if they return the person, you're good.
Right.
In digital ransomware, even if you pay the ransom, they give you back the encryption keys, they still have that original data. They could decide in a year, hey, I'm going to release this and embarrass you. They could decide, hey, I'm just going to release this anyway. Right. And there's no honor among thieves. Right.
Right.
How can you trust that they will do the right thing?
Yeah, you can't. Which is really why the only defense to this type of ransomware is to not let it happen in the first place, which is why I think that people should be focusing a lot more on the prevention of exfiltration, right? Exfiltration is just a very fancy word for sucking the data out of your company, right? And there are ways to do that, but they are not easy, and they come with a lot of false positives, et cetera, et cetera. So not everybody is that hot on it. And I just think it's something that we need to continue to work on.
Yeah. Or detection also, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Detecting that you've got the ransomware, detecting that the exfiltration is happening.
Yeah.
Stopping the exfiltration, right? Because a lot of the exfiltration is all sent to like the same place, right? There's certain websites and things that it's like, why are we sending data to what is like mega some, and there's some big file sharing site? Like you should block all access to all like file sharing sites like that, right? Yeah. And then if you have a legitimate need for that, then you open it up. But chances are you probably don't. Yeah. So that's just a brief overview of what ransomware is, what it isn't, how it's evolved. And by the way, just a final thing regarding the whole exfiltration thing. Talking about part 2 and part 3, not only have they gone directly attacking the backup systems in order to basically take them out of the war, that's not what I meant. To take them away from you as a weapon in the war. I don't know. I'm mixing metaphors here, but they've discovered that it is a source for exfiltration. So if they can gain unrestricted access to the backup system, then they can do that. And by the way, if this is your first episode, you really should go back a couple episodes and listen to that episode with Dwayne LaFlotte, where it's talking about a red team person, and he talked about just how great it is if you can gain access to a backup system. He was like, I love backup systems. Right. Yeah. That was a great episode. Any final thoughts?
No, I think, we covered sort of what's ransomware, what isn't. And like you said, Curtis, at the beginning, I was also thinking, it's just software installed that someone drops onto your system. But really, it's this lengthy process that happens in order to be able to gain that foothold. And so, yeah.
And I do think that maybe that's the way it started, right? It was an initial piece of software that you just happened to download, and it would encrypt your data, boom, and reach out to the person so that they could do that. But that's not going to work in a large organization, right?
Yeah.
So their attack evolved as well, right? So they've evolved over the time to go after bigger and bigger fish.
Yeah. Well, and I think also that a lot of the security infrastructure has also evolved. And so the ransomware attackers are also evolving in turn. It's like a cat and mouse game.
Exactly. And you have to be right all the time. They only have to be right once, fortunately. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for having a chat.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed these. I'm excited for this new series.
Yeah, me too. And thanks to our listeners. We'd be nothing without you. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.